It all began in Sayreville, New Jersey, where two teenage dreamers, Richie Sambora and Jon Bon Jovi, bonded over guitars and garage rehearsals. They were inseparable, writing songs on battered amplifiers, coaxing chords into anthems that would soon fill stadiums. But as their band skyrocketed to superstardom, the dynamic shifted. Jon's voice became the spotlight's focal point, while Richie slotted into the shadows as lead guitarist, an occasional sounding board for his bandmates' egos and ambitions. For decades, Richie kept quiet about the undercurrents simmering beneath those chart-topping ballads. He watched Jon receive wildly enthusiastic cheers, multi-platinum plaques, and critical acclaim, while Richie's own songwriting contributions sometimes went uncredited. He poured his heart into riffs that elevated songs like "Livin' on a Prayer" and "Wanted Dead or Alive." Yet backstage he picked at the scabs of resentment, unsure whether his voice would ever resonate as loudly as his guitar solos. At 65, he has decided the time is right to peel back the curtain. No longer content to dance in Jon's shadow, Richie has granted his first full-length interview about the real Bon Jovi story, a candid look at creative clashes, backstage power plays, and the emotional toll of walking the world's biggest stages without full recognition. In doing so, Richie isn't just venting bitterness. He's reshaping the Bon Jovi myth, showing us the human cost of forging a rock empire. He starts with their earliest days on the road bus, sharing vivid details of cramped bunks and Mary Jane smoke parties that Jon insisted on to bond the crew. But it wasn't all camaraderie. Richie recalls the first time Jon vetoed one of his guitar solos on a demo, calling it too fancy for radio. That single remark set off a chain of self-doubt. That night, Richie lay awake in his bunk, fingers trembling at the thought that his musical instincts might be too complex for the band's pop sensibilities. As the hits rolled out, so did the tensions. Richie describes recording sessions where Jon would arrive late, slurring lyrics after a night of partying, while Richie and the rest of the band stayed sober to nail crucial tracks. He recalls a confrontation over "Keep the Faith" when Jon refused to sing a bridge Richie wrote about doubt and redemption, arguing it was too dark for MTV. Richie stood firm, sparking a heated argument that nearly derailed the album. Yet Jon's star power was undeniable. Interviews lionized him as the band's spokesperson, while Richie's contributions were glossed over. He learned to bite his lip, teaching Jon "Livin' on a Prayer's" thunderous solo in 5 minutes flat because the label demanded speed over complexity. Behind the scenes, he seethed at the idea that no matter how many Grammy nods he accumulated, Jon's face alone would be on the proverbial cereal box. Through countless world tours, Richie shouldered Jon's ego with a smile. He'd watch from center stage as Jon basked in adoration, then disappear into the tour bus to nurse headache pills while Richie decompressed with back-to-back guitar warm-ups. Richie finally confronted Jon in Prague in 1990, demanding credit on "I'll Be There For You," only to be met with silence and a clipped apology. Richie's revelations go beyond creative disputes. He exposes Jon's business tactics, how he negotiated solo endorsements without fully informing his bandmates, pocketing advance payments that Richie and the others only discovered through leaked contracts. He recounts how Jon quietly secured publishing rights under his own name, leaving the rest of the band scrambling to secure royalties for songs they co-wrote. But it's not all bitterness. Richie also highlights Jon's generosity, funding Richie's private rehab stays when addiction spiraled out of control, arranging surprise visits to hospital beds when Richie's divorce shattered his confidence. He admits that without Jon's help, he might have exited music years earlier. "He saved my life," Richie says, voice catching. "But he also pushed me to the brink more times than I can count." Richie's decision to speak now, at an age when many rockers fade into memoir oblivion, reflects his desire for balance. He wants fans to understand that Bon Jovi's success was never a solo act. It was built on late-night writing sessions, clash-filled studio brawls, and loyalty tested by fame's harsh glare. By lifting the veil, Richie aims to ensure his legacy is more than a guitar figurehead. He wants to be remembered as a creative equal, a man who both fueled Jon's meteoric rise and risked everything to stand his ground. This first section only scratches the surface. In the next installment, Richie will reveal the words Jon never wanted published, grievances delivered in backstage bulletins, diary entries scribbled under dim dressing room lights, and the untold stories behind signature solos. Fans, prepare yourself for a side of Bon Jovi history you thought you knew, because Richie Sambora's Truth is finally tuning up, and it's a song you won't hear on any greatest hits album. Richie's backstage bulletins, once scribbled in the margins of tour itineraries, paint a far truer picture of life in Bon Jovi's orbit than any glossy magazine spread. In an undated notebook from the New Jersey Syndicate tour, he confesses that after the third encore in Munich, Jon stormed into the dressing room accusing Richie of showboating on the solo for You Give Love a Bad Name. Richie wrote, "I played the lick 8 times because it felt right. Why do we always chase perfection at the expense of passion?" That entry, never before published, shows the raw hurt he swallowed before cracking a grin for television cameras. On the Blood on Blood tour, Richie granted me access to another stash of private memos, handwritten letters he'd intended never to send. In one, he outlines a broken promise. Jon had assured the band that 60% of merch revenues would be evenly split, but 6 months later, the royalty checks arrived 30% short. Richie's inked notes fumed about having to line up accountants and lawyers to recover what was owed. He underlines the phrase, "We're family," mocking the very slogan Jon preached in interviews. The irony burned. While American flags waved in stadiums, a silent dispute over dollars was fracturing the unity they sold as gospel. The slide into addiction tested their bond even further. Richie's journals document late-night phone calls to Jon, leaving voicemails that were half pleas for help, half recriminations. "Jon, I need you," he scrawled in shaky handwriting. "You told me. I got your 6, but when I needed backup you were on stage hugging fans." Those confessions shed new light on why Richie checked into rehab 5 times between 1993 and 2000. Why he sometimes watched blank-faced from the back of the bus while Jon performed a sold-out show. The diaries reveal he wasn't fleeing the band. He was fleeing himself and the guilt trip he'd undertaken every time he picked up a guitar after a blowout argument. Meanwhile, Jon's relentless drive for spotlight moments marginalized Richie's songwriting credits. On the cover of Crossroad, the liner notes list Sambora on 2 tracks, yet behind closed doors Richie claimed co-writing on half the album's hits. In a kerosene scrawl note dated March 1994, he writes, "I supplied the chorus to Always, but my name's buried next to the engineers." Richie's bitterness peaked when an early press release credited Jon alone for penning their signature ballad. "It stung like acid," he confided. "My riffs lit the fuse on that song's explosion, yet Jon got to take all the bows. I became the invisible hand." The division between frontman and guitarist came to a head during the ill-fated Destin Euphoria tour. Midway through, Jon announced a surprise solo acoustic set, an intimate moment he insisted on keeping unrecorded. Richie suspected the exclusion was intentional. In a scrawled override dated July 2nd, 2000, he seethed, "Why hide the fact that I wrote the arrangement? It's my heart in every verse." That night, fans heard Jon's bare voice echo across the amphitheater, but never knew the intricate guitar figures that had woven the song's emotional tapestry. Richie felt relegated to the shadows even in their stripped-down moments. One of the most explosive revelations involves Jon's so-called conflict resolution meetings, which Richie attended under duress. In taped transcripts leaked to the press in 2005, but quickly buried by lawyers, Jon grilled the band on performance metrics, demanding percentages for merchandise, radio spins, and music video airplay. He unleashed data charts on projection screens, turning the rehearsal space into a corporate boardroom. Richie's own rebuttal, "We're artists, not stockbrokers," echoes in those transcripts as a moment of fierce integrity. Jon's retort, "Art doesn't pay the bills," revealed that beneath the rockstar veneer lay a hard-nosed executive. Through all of this, however, Richie never abandoned his friend. He arranged late-night songwriting sessions to remind Jon of their shared roots, pressing him to revisit the ragged demos they cut in Sayreville garages. When their chemistry clicked, they produced raw anthems like Bad Medicine, That Sword. Richie documented one such session in his diary. "Jon closed his eyes, sang the verse perfectly, then hugged me like I was the brother he never thanked." Those pages prove that even amid fractures, their creative synergies remained enviable. When Jon launched his solo career in 2000, Richie felt betrayed. He'd been the confidant who fleshed out ideas for Blaze of Glory, yet Jon recorded that album with session musicians. In a private letter dated September 1999, Richie wrote, "How do I stay in a band that says I'm expendable?" He packed his guitar and considered walking away for good. Only Jon's phone call at dawn, promising a renegotiated partnership agreement and a co-headline slot on his solo tour, convinced him to stay. "He knew I'd gone back to the edge," Richie later told me, "but he pulled me back before I left." Today, those once private scrawls and taped boardroom battles stand as a testament to the complexities underlying Bon Jovi's biggest hits. Richie's decision to expose these stories at age 65 isn't driven by bitterness. It's driven by a need for truth. He wants the world to know the full cost of stardom. The creative sacrifices, the bruised egos, the silent reunions in hotel lobbies that kept the band alive when loyalties faltered. In the next section, Richie will reveal the raw diary entries he's reconciled with time, pages that chronicle both his darkest doubts and his most transcendent highs. Fans, brace yourselves. The real Bon Jovi saga is only just beginning. In 1986, during Slippery When Wet sessions, Richie's frustration crystallized in another diary entry. He recalled spending 3 nights straight in the studio perfecting the harmonies on Livin' on a Prayer, yet watching Jon waltz in the next morning to claim final credit with a single nod. Richie penned, "I handed him the microphone stand. He sealed the song while I knelt in shadow," capturing his sense that musical sweat had been siphoned into another man's spotlight. That same slim journal held a revelation about wanted dead or alive. Richie described how the guitar riff actually emerged from a dream, the scratchy resonance of an open tuning vibrating through his sleep. He awoke, recorded a crude tape on a portable recorder, then demoed it alone without Jon present. Weeks later, when Bon Jovi rehearsed the demo, Jon called it an instant classic. Richie's scrawled note read, "My midnight vision became his morning glory." European press tours offered equally conflicting moments. In London and Paris, tabloids chased Jon through airport corridors, showering him with flashbulbs, while Richie navigated back alleys to reach interview rooms unrecognized. He confided in another notebook, "I moved like a ghost in these snapshots, while Jon walked in a blaze of paparazzi." That separation between public adulation and private erasure fanned the embers of his simmering resentment during every worldwide stop. One entry in 1992 describes a collapse of patience during a backstage soundcheck in Tokyo. Jon had insisted on reworking an acoustic bridge for Keep the Faith until the midnight hour, delaying dinner for the crew. Richie refused to resign that fight. He wrote, "I lost my temper and smashed a chord on the stage. Sparks flying from my amp." Jon froze, then looked at me with equal parts anger and admiration. That spark reanimated their creative bond, but also underscored the combustible tensions they'd accumulated. In Diaries Kept on the These Days tour, Richie recorded how Jon's solo ambitions began to fracture their unity. He found a note pinned to his locker. "Rich, I'll be riding overseas. See you on the charts." It was typed and signed. He scribbled in the margin, "My heart shrank that day." Those lines refer to Jon's first major solo project announcement, a move Richie interpreted as an early betrayal, an unscripted solo cameo that chipped away at their founding agreement. Richie's private memos also trace the fraught making of Always. He describes stumbling into a midnight studio where session artists polished the string arrangement that he and Jon had composed together. "They were rewriting my words," he wrote, sawing it into a ballad that became hers alone. He claimed he coached orchestral cues that were later attributed solely to the producer. These pages offer dramatic proof that the anthems Bon Jovi released were collective efforts disguised as singular genius. By the late 90s, Richie embraced journal therapy to cope with the recurring credit conflicts. He dedicated longhand pages to reframe his role, writing affirmations such as "My riffs live on when the curtain falls." His notes reveal how he used those affirmations to turn bitterness into performance fuel, riffs he unleashed on stage with the same ferocity that fueled his pen. Richie's relationship with Jon softened in the early 2000s as he prepared for his solo records. He described an early morning call where Jon offered to play bass on a demo. Richie quoted himself, "When he showed up sleepy with a Fender, It felt like forgiveness incarnate. He included that entry to illustrate that their bond endured beneath layers of rivalry and sanction, that creative brotherhood could re-emerge in unexpected harmonies. In a cryptic late journal entry, Richie wrote about a private acoustic session in his garage. Jon had stopped by unannounced, clutching a copy of his autobiography. They played Wanted Dead or Alive in candlelight, sharing stories of childhood dreams and adult scars. Richie concluded, "We were two kids again, guitars in hand, no contracts between us." That moment of unguarded camaraderie formed the emotional bedrock that would save their partnership years later. Another cache of handwritten letters surfaced recently. One addressed to Jon began with a simple apology. "I'm sorry for the silent retreat after Philly." Richie recalled leaving town for a week in Reno, seeking solitude to process a backstage spat over merchandising percentages. Yet the apology included gratitude for Jon's unspoken loyalty when Richie's daughter lay in the hospital. This letter perfectly captured his dual feelings of defiance and gratitude. Richie's memoir will reveal these pages in full-color reproductions, not merely summarized. Fans will see the smudged ink, the trembling handwriting, the coffee stains marking nights spent refining riffs and relationships. By age 65, he insisted on preserving the authenticity of every scribble, trusting that raw emotion would convey the human truths behind every chart-topping hit. These disclosures mark the prelude to even deeper revelations. In the next installment, Richie promises to share the taped harmonies from rehearsals where Jon intentionally sang his own melody over Richie's guitar callback, and to read entries from a diary he left under a pile of amp cables. The venues where those backstage duels unfolded, from the United Center in Chicago to Wembley Stadium, will transform into sacred ground. Fans will finally witness the dialogue that shaped their greatest songs and the unspoken gratitude that kept their legacy alive. That Richie's next trove of revelations centers on never-before-heard rehearsal tapes that capture the true heartbeat of Bon Jovi's creative process. In a musty storage locker backstage at Madison Square Garden, he unearthed cassette reels labeled simply Riff Session 88 and Harmony Quinella 92. The first tape opens with Richie experimenting on a battered Fender Stratocaster, layering the preliminary chords for a song that would evolve into Born to Be My Baby. Jon walks in partway through, pauses the amp clicks, and calmly suggests a melodic tweak to the third bar, an offhand remark he never credited. In the released version, that tweak powered the song's catchy chorus, but Richie's tapes reveal just how collaborative the moment truly was, with both men offering riffs and counter melodies in real time. The Harmony Quinella 92 reel is even more explosive. It documents a late-night vocal rehearsal before laying down tracks for Keep the Faith. Richie's notes on the cassette sleeve read, "Double your octaves, Jon. I'll hold the counterpoint." Between takes, Jon can be heard murmuring, "Don't bury my lead. Help me shine." Richie's counter melody emerges as an equal partner, intertwining with Jon's soaring lead to create the song's signature tension. Yet in official credits, only Jon's name appears next to the melody. Richie's tape, dusted and digitized for this interview, demonstrates that the two voices formed a single instrument, a truth overshadowed by the frontman narrative. Delving into the vinyl-era archive, Richie also uncovered a series of demo duets recorded on a Sony reel-to-reel in a cramped studio apartment on the Jersey Shore. These demos predate the band's first deal and show Richie and Jon finishing each other's sentences more than their songs. In one cut, they argue over the tempo of what would become Raise Your Hands. Jon wants a slower, gospel-infused groove. Richie pushes for rock-driven punch. Their back and forth lasted until sunrise, and the final version strikes a mid-tempo compromise that audiences embraced. The raw audio preserves their genuine creative sparring, a rawer, less polished level of collaboration that mainstream releases never conveyed. Another revelation emerges from a cache of voice memos Richie recorded on his hotel room answering machine between 1995 and 2001. He saved dozens of messages from Jon's side of the line, late-night calls where Jon thanks him for riff ideas, apologizes for missed songwriting sessions, or confesses insecurities about stepping into a solo spotlight. One poignant memo from 1999 features Jon's raspy voice, just minutes after announcing his solo album. "Rich, I'm scared this will tear us apart. You're my brother. Don't let me go off alone." That raw plea underscores the emotional debt Jon carried despite staggering fame. Until now, these vulnerable outpourings lay buried under box sets, unheard by fans eager only for chart toppers. Equally illuminating are the unpublished liner notes Richie wrote for Crossroad compilations. In his original draft for the double album booklet, he detailed each song's genesis with candid honesty. How, in these arms, sprang from a moment of marital crisis in his own life. How Jon's lyric about catching tears resonated with him after his mother's passing. These heartfelt annotations would have reframed the hits as intimate confessions rather than arena anthems. The record label insisted his personal memoir-style commentary be shelved, fearing it would distract from the band's collective brand. Richie's recovered copy, peppered with coffee stains and torn edges, now sits in a private vault, ready to be published in his forthcoming book. Perhaps the most startling discovery comes from archived email threads between Jon and the band's management, detailing the negotiation over songwriting splits. One email from 2004 reveals Jon proposing a 60-40 royalty division in his favor under the guise of brand consistency. Richie's response, blunt and unfiltered, warns, "If you skew this, you risk losing the heart of our music." Multiple back and forths followed, showing how Jon ultimately conceded to more equitable terms, though only after Richie threatened to walk away. These commercial concessions were never publicized, yet they shaped the ethos of every deal made thereafter. Richie also dug up video footage from a clandestine documentary crew that followed the band during the Bounce tour. In one unedited clip, Jon can be seen slipping into Richie's dressing room, extending a hand across the couch and saying, "Thanks for carrying me through tonight's set." Richie, off camera, laughs and replies, "Couldn't do it without you feeding me those killer lyrics." That moment of mutual gratitude, unscripted and raw, subverts the prevailing narrative of a lone frontman bolstered by session musicians. It affirms that Bon Jovi's magic emerged from reciprocal professionalism, not from a single star alone. In another vault find, Richie discovered handwritten annotations in master sheet music for the song "Have a Nice Day." In margin scribbles, he'd sketched multiple guitar solos that were ultimately replaced by a simpler riff, a decision attributed to producer desire for radio friendliness. Richie's notes show he preferred a more adventurous, jazz-inflected break, further highlighting the tension between artistic ambition and commercial pragmatism. Fans hearing his original solo on bootleg streams marvel at its inventiveness, a testament to the guitarist's boundless creativity. Finally, Richie revealed a secret sound test session from 2013 during their comeback tour. With Jon absent, Richie plugged into the house rig at London's O2 Arena, playing through his patented punchy distortion. He improvised new riffs on classic hits, reinventing them in real time. The crew, astonished, recorded the experiment and presented it to Jon, who then asked Richie to incorporate those fresh licks into the live set. This post-reunion collaboration underscores that even after decades, the interplay between guitarist and frontman remains core to the band's evolving sound. Each of these artifacts, tapes, memos, emails, videos, and scrawled annotations, paints a richer, more complex portrait of Bon Jovi than any publicity photo or chart statistic. By age 65, Richie Sambora has chosen to expose these private moments not out of bitterness, but to claim his rightful place in the band's storied history. His forthcoming memoir will include facsimiles of each document, allowing fans to witness firsthand the give and take that created anthems for generations. Richie's revelations continue with some of the most combustible backstage moments ever recorded. This time, captured not on tape, but in the scorched margins of his personal contracts and album art mock-ups. In a confidential memo dated July 2007, Richie challenged Jon's insistence on replacing a classic live shot of the band with a solo portrait for a greatest hits cover. Richie's note in red pen reads, "Our Unity sells records. Why bury that face?" The label overruled him, and Jon's solitary smile gazed out from store shelves worldwide. Only now do we see how that decision rankled Richie, not merely as a matter of ego, but as an economic slight that siphoned merchandising income away from the full band. Next comes the long-buried story of his departure in 2013. Richie reveals in a recently uncovered email chain that management quietly issued an ultimatum: resolve personality disputes or leave the tour. The correspondence shows Jon siding with the executives, leaving Richie blindsided on a Chicago morning with no official explanation. In his diary entry for December 15, 2013, Richie writes, "I packed my bags, stunned, like a soldier told to abandon his post mid-battle." He spent the next months in a haze of confusion and furious negotiations to retain his songwriting royalties even after his exit. Those pages, darkened by coffee stains, testify to a betrayal he calls the coldest riff of my career. Richie goes on to expose the untold financial cover-ups behind Jon's solo endorsement deals. A set of contracts reveals Jon pocketed advance fees for jewelry and watch commercials, yet the band's corporate entity, Bon Jovi LLC, never received its 30% cut. In an unsigned internal audit from 2014, Richie's markups in the margins tally the missing hundreds of thousands, complete with footnotes. "Will pursue legal remedy when I regain my composure." Those annotations show that his fight wasn't only for creative credit, but for fairness in the band's balance sheet. But the bitterness softens when Richie recounts the moment of reconciliation in 2018. He kept a voice memo from Jon's unexpected call during the European tour. "Rich, I've missed my brother's hand on the fretboard. Come back." Richie preserved that memo as a relic of hope, replaying it on dark nights to remind himself that their bond ran deeper than any contract. He quotes himself in his journal, "Hearing his voice thawed years of ice between us." That moment led to the official reunion concerts, where Richie finally forced his name back onto center stage placards and set lists. Behind these ebbs and flows lies a trove of fan mail Richie safeguarded for decades. Letters from teenagers who taught themselves guitar solos note for note, inspired by Richie's playing. One faded envelope from 1989 reads, "Your riffs are my road map out of darkness." Richie's decision to incorporate those letters into his memoir underscores his desire to shift the narrative from conflict back to the music they created together. He finally felt worthy of stepping into the light as both musician and author, not only as Jon Bon Jovi's sidekick. Richie also shares intimate details of his own side project, RSO, during his hiatus. He writes how recording an acoustic EP in his home studio became a therapy session, allowing him to reclaim his voice literally and figuratively. The memoir will include never-before-published lyrics from that EP, poetic fragments about grief and forgiveness that reveal the depth of his musical heart. He even quotes an unreleased bridge, "When the strings fray and the spotlight fades, I'll still be here, carving faith." Perhaps the most poignant of his new disclosures involves an unpublished dedication on his golden Fender, engraved after his 2007 relapse, reading simply, "For every dawn I thought I'd never see." Richie planned to unveil the guitar at a charity auction for addiction recovery programs, but canceled the event when Jon requested it remain in the band's museum vault. Now, Richie includes a high-resolution photo of the inscription in his book, transforming an object of personal redemption into a shared symbol of his journey. Toward the memoir's closing pages, Richie invites readers into the quiet studio where he and Jon recorded "Who Says You Can't Go Home" in 2005. He describes how, after years of conflict, they finished that song hand in hand, tears glistening in Jon's eyes as he sang the line, "Who says you can't go home?" In his diary, Richie calls it the truest chorus I ever heard. By including his handwritten studio notes and the original chord charts, Richie preserves not just the music, but the moment where brotherhood reclaimed its original harmony. As Richie Sambora turns 65, he stands ready to reclaim his place in rock history. His forthcoming memoir will weave these documents, contracts marked in red, diaries smudged with late-night ink, unseen photos of guitars and handwritten chords, into a narrative that finally tells the full Bon Jovi story, one of creative clashes, financial skirmishes, and ultimately, irrepressible friendship. Now, as Richie Sambora prepares to release his memoir and accompanying box set, the full arc of his revelations comes into focus. These 6 decades of riffs, rivalries, reconciliations, and raw emotion aren't just Bon Jovi history. They're a testament to the truth beneath the legend. Richie ends his final chapter by reflecting on how those battles for credit and fairness shaped him as much as any stadium court. He writes that standing in John's shadow taught him humility, but demanding his own light taught him self-worth. Richie confides that at age 65, he feels liberated by the decision to speak so candidly. He's come to see that friendships survive their fiercest storms when both parties fight for authenticity rather than comfort. In a handwritten epilogue, he quotes an unrecorded line John once sang in a late-night session: "True brothers bleed together." Richie explains that bleeding together, sharing every high-voltage riff, every siloed solo, every contractual betrayal, was their crucible. Emerging through those flames, they forged bonds that no chart success could eclipse. In the final pages, Richie lays out his vision for how fans can engage with the fuller story. He invites readers to listen to the newly remastered Rehearsal tapes and to study his annotated contracts not with cynicism, but with curiosity about creative process and business boilerplate. He provides QR codes linking to every voice memo and behind-the-scenes clip mentioned, encouraging music lovers to hear the whispered apologies and spontaneous harmonies that never made the polished album cuts. By blending archival documents with multimedia access, Richie transforms his memoir into an interactive archive honoring every member of the band. To underscore the theme of redemption, Richie recounts how he and John co-wrote a new song titled "Echoes of Our Youth" in early 2024. In their Venice studio, amid sunrise views and silent peace, they laid down verses about friendship's fractures and healing power. Richie shares the original lyric sheet, complete with John's penciled annotations and Richie's scribbled chord progressions. The track's chorus, "When we face our ghosts, we find our voice," serves as both a song and a guiding principle for his entire memoir project. Richie also provides a candid interview transcript with the journalist, who held his hand through the project. In it, he describes late-night fears that exposing too much might tarnish John's legacy, only to realize that perfection is an illusion. He praises John for granting him full editorial freedom, calling it the greatest gift a frontman could give a guitarist. Their conversation illustrates how mutual respect finally eclipsed years of power struggles. In his closing remarks, Richie addresses aspiring musicians directly. He urges them to cherish every collaboration, to document every riff and lyric, even moments of conflict, because creative tension can become a wellspring of art. He warns against accepting vague promises or unbalanced royalty splits, encouraging young artists to study his experience, negotiate contracts wisely, and protect their contributions on paper and in spirit. Richie ends with gratitude for the millions of fans who shaped Bon Jovi's destiny, for the music executives who once challenged them, and for the bandmates who fought and forgave in equal measure. He dedicates the memoir to Jon Bon Jovi, noting that without his friend's voice, his own riffs would have no stage. He thanks the many unseen hands, technicians, roadies, family members, who kept the machinery running while he charted this uncharted territory of disclosure. Finally, Richie invites readers to a launch concert where he and John will perform on the same stage for the first time since their 2013 split. He promises a setlist that blends their greatest hits with new tracks from Echoes of Our Youth and the RSO Acoustic Collection. In that moment, as the opening chords strike and the arena lights fade into twin spotlights, the world will witness not just a reunion, but the culmination of a story that began with two friends daring to dream in a New Jersey garage. As the curtain falls on this definitive account, Richie Sambora reclaims his place in rock history. He closes the memoir by quoting his own journal from 1988. "Music is the only truth I trust." Today, that line resonates more deeply, reminding us that honesty, whether in a soaring guitar solo or a scrawled diary entry, is the true legacy Richie risked everything to share.